I'm Josh Kaplowitz. I'm the Vice President for Offshore Wind at the American Clean Power Association. We're a pan-technology trade association. We do onshore wind, offshore wind, solar, battery storage, transmission. And we have a strong presence here in California, advocating for all the great policies that we've been starting to hear about today. We work very closely with Adam and Offshore Wind California to achieve the industry's objectives. Now, we heard a lot about this new industry and the newness within the industry, floating technology being really at the cutting edge. But you don't build a new domestic industry without regulatory and policy support. Now, the ingredients are all here. We have a lead federal agency in the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management with 15 years of experience and lots of lessons learned on the East Coast that they're ready to apply out here. And we have a state government, of course, with a mandate to get this all done under AB 525 with a ambitious but achievable 25 gigawatt goal. But of course, the devil's in the details. As one of our panelists this morning said, we have a belief system, but we need to turn that into action and into reality. And today we have the perfect panel to unpack all the issues with turning those goals into policies that will make this industry happen. First, we have Le-Quyen Nguyen, the Deputy Secretary for Energy at the California Natural Resources Agency. Elizabeth Huber, Director of Siting, Transmission, Environmental Resource Protection Division at the California Energy Commission. And Doug Boren, the Pacific Region's Director at Boren. So let's get the conversation started. Well, it's great to have such expertise and leadership on this stage. So just to get started, let's have everyone introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the role that you and your agencies play in the process.
Okay, I guess I'll start. Good morning, everybody. I'm Le-Quyen Nguyen, Deputy Secretary for Energy at the California Natural Resources Agency. So in case you haven't been on our website recently, our mission is to restore, protect, and manage our cultural, historical, and natural resources here in California. So how does that interact with offshore wind? Of course, offshore wind is a natural resource, but more importantly, a lot of the agencies who are involved in the offshore wind space, whether it's from energy policy and planning perspective or from permitting, fall underneath of our resources umbrella. So of course we have the California Energy Commission, which I think many of you are familiar with. We also have the Coastal Commission, the State Lands Commission, Ocean Protection Council, and California Department of Fish and Wildlife, among many other agencies who are working on offshore wind.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Huber, and I'm the Director for the Siting, Transmission, Environmental Protection Division at the California Energy Commission. Most of you know the Energy Commission is the state's primary planning and policy agency. And my division, we actually are keeping the lights on today, if you will, with we oversee 76 thermal power plants, 50 megawatts or more. And but the other half of the division is where we're trying to get under SB 100 to a clean and renewable future in California. And that includes offshore wind. So we're the lead agency, collaborating and coordinating with our partner CNRA agencies and the other energy agencies on how we're going to get offshore wind deployed in the state with the goals of 2 to 5 gigawatts by 2030 and 25 gigawatts by 2045.
Right, Doug.
Great, thanks, Josh. I'm Doug Boren. I'm the Regional Director for the Bowen Pacific region. And first, I'd like to start by saying, although I have a single-use plastic water bottle and a tie, I am a Californian, as you can see from my palm tree socks. I'll say this is a very exciting time to be in offshore wind in California. I'm sure everyone's heard before, we had the lease sale last December, very exciting for the region and for the Bureau, bringing floating wind in California to the mix. I'll say, but that was 5 months ago. The Bureau in the region is responsible for making areas available, and also responsible for looking at the plans when they come in for the 5 leases that we do have offshore. So great to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
All right. I noticed that you're a little alone over there. This is not intended to be a symbolic at all of the federal-state relationship. Well, I want to get started talking about obviously AB 525 is the big, especially on the state side, but with federal implications. It was enacted in January 2022 and requires interim reports and products that are used to inform the overall AB 525 strategic plan. It's a really tight timeline, right? What are the challenges and the benefits of the sprint that AB 525 sets out?
I guess I will start with that question. I don't know if I want to call it a challenge because, but it is. I have a wonderful offshore wind team, but they're all new. So like myself, I got into this space last August, and many of the team are less than a year involved in the offshore wind space. So that tight timeline has played an impact in getting up to speed as soon as possible. So that's some of the challenges, but the opportunities are, we are an agency that has led on policy and planning, as I already mentioned, and it's a great team, and so the skill sets that the team have are transferable from the land use activities we've done with some of our renewable projects that many of you have probably already are aware of, but to apply that to offshore wind, I think has been beneficial to the commission, our partner agencies, and the state.
Can I just add
Good,
on?
yeah, please.
Yeah, so I think the other benefit of that is it's nice to just have this all written down. It is definitely a crunch for our agencies to come up with this document, but I think just having this information in one place, again, having this, this plan for how we're going to implement offshore wind is very beneficial. I mean, we've been talking about offshore wind for such a long time. I mean, Doug and I, before this, were talking about it, and we go way back to 2016, which sounds like a long time to me. But we've been working on offshore wind since then, and it's just nice to have all of this on paper. So I think that's a benefit. One of the challenges, though, that I think, building off of what Elizabeth said, is, offshore wind is going to be a very big process. And again, just thinking about how long we've spent working on offshore wind, coming up with, the strategic plan in a year, that's a lot to do. And so really making sure that we're doing adequate outreach and engagement with, all the different stakeholders, all the different agencies who have some sort of role, I think that is a challenge. I mean, definitely meeting the challenge, but that has been a challenge, I think.
So Doug, you're not off the hook here. I know that 525 is not technically your baby, but so I, in a prior life, was legal counsel for Bowen from 2015 to 2020, and I remember it was it was a quieter time when I was out in Camarillo. How has AB 525 changed your role?
And I think what everyone's trying to say is I've been doing this for quite a while, and it's great working with the team. I'll just say AB 525. It's a great opportunity, and it works well in the Bowen process because, like Le-Quyen said, it's written down, so it does provide that certainty. People know that this is a goal, this is what we're shooting for. So even though it is a monumental task, I think it provides that clarity on where we need to go, and that it's a team effort to get there. So yeah, Josh, it's been a busy time. AB 525 has been a part of it. We started before AB 525 with the first lease sale. So I think the writing's on the wall. That it's going to be plenty of opportunity for the Pacific region to grow and continue to partner with the state to make it a reality.
Yeah, and if I can add to it also, the bill, even though it's a tight timeline, was well written in the sense that it gave us milestones. So we have interim reports. So to set the foundation for any strategic plan, you need planning goals, right? So we set those planning goals in August of 2022. And then we had to start looking at what are some, key things that we need to identify and address. And so our second report was around, obviously, the seaports infrastructure and workforce development. We need that infrastructure if we're going to be successful in deploying offshore wind. And then tomorrow, gosh, the month is going by already, the commission is getting ready to adopt a AB 525 offshore wind energy permitting roadmap. And it's providing additional discussion, and these 3 interim reports are going to form the final strategic plan. So by having kind of milestones through the process is allowing us to continue the engagement that we've had with our stakeholders, our government-to-government relationships with tribal nations, and the general public. Just through our other SB 100 activities, we've been able to just transition and include offshore wind in all these conversations through these milestones. So I think that's been key too for us being able to do what we're doing.
So I want to ask you about this permitting roadmap, which I know everyone's read cover to cover. So everyone, bring in the granular questions as you think of them. But it really is. It's a monumental document. Can you explain? Can you talk a little bit about the options that you laid out and why you arrived at the recommendation you did?
I will start with that. So,
and
yes,
Le-Quyen
please
and Doug
join
are welcome to weigh in and opine as well.
So, as this room represents, you're a diverse group, right? You're a diverse group of interested stakeholders in the offshore wind space. And because of that, we have received comments. We've had consultations with fishery groups, with tribal governments. We've had workshops. We've had one-on-one conversations, and then we've had docketed feedback on what you all want to see in a final permitting roadmap. And because of the short timeline, we felt that collectively with our partner agencies that we should lay out all the feedback that we've received and put it in this interim report so you all know that we have been reviewing, we have been looking at studies, at ongoing research, and came up with some collaborating, coordinating, and specific to environmental review, and then the discussion of maybe a single lead agency. So these were all put into this document and laying out the feedback and what we thought would be most appropriate, and especially the way the state works. Everything that we do, we have a 48-year history of permitting that I can speak for the agency, but my CNRA partner agencies also do environmental review, and we've been collaborating for a long time. And so we just wanted to lay out all the roles and responsibilities in order to permit clean technology in the state, and then we think that that report kind of helps frame where we want to go for the final permitting chapter in the strategic plan.
I would also add too that, like what you see reflected in the report, it's based off of years, tens of years of working with the other agencies, working with the federal government. There's a lot of processes that we're building off on, landscape scale planning processes. I don't know if many of you in the room remember the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan. So that was for renewable energy development in the desert, and that was also a multi-year undertaking. But again, there were lessons learned from that process for how we could streamline the processes or how we could leverage each other's efforts. And so again, I think what you're seeing like reflected in the recommendation in the permitting roadmap is some of those lessons learned. And again, for those of us or for those in the room who may be thinking like, well, this other option may have been more streamlined or this other option would work better. I mean, there are pros and cons to each of the options, but I think the option that you'll see that's recommended in that report, again, just builds off of that experience that we have and lessons learned.
I will just add, although this is an AB 525 thing, the Boren team has been working with the CEC through this process to make sure that, the federal permitting process aligns nicely with, the state permitting process. So, wherever the state lands on the final roadmap, it's going to mesh nicely with the federal side so that we can go through and be as efficient as possible as we get the projects when they come in.
Well, I also want to add, BOEM's not out of it. So we did add in the report for clarity and understanding for those who are still not completely clear on our federal partners. we have a whole chapter dedicated to what this man and his team does. So you're not quite out of 525.
One of the questions I had gotten from a couple of members is why I think when people see one-stop shopping, anyone who's a permitting geek will say, "Wow, that's the gold standard." We have that in Europe. A lot of countries in Europe have that one decision maker. I know with the federal process, there are some challenges with getting all the different agencies to sort of all work in tandem with different statutory authorities. Just kind of curious as to why that wasn't the recommendation, and sort of why, and maybe a little bit about like what the merits of the recommendation were.
So I think when you see one-stop shop, there are some pros to a one-stop shop option, but a lot of times when you're looking at the one-stop shop approach, it's often in the context of, all of that permitting is happening at either the state level or the federal level or the local level. With offshore wind, it's a really complex process, I think, for permitting, where you're having federal agencies engage, you're having state agencies engage, as well as local agencies. And even depending on where your project is located, you may have to pull in different state agencies into that permitting process. So really trying to center everything into this one-stop shop could be quite difficult, and it would also be, I would say, time-consuming. We're in a time crunch here, I think, to get offshore wind implemented. We're supposed to get 2 to 5 gigawatts by 2030. I think we're all trying to work towards that goal. The way we have it now, there's multiple agencies who each have their own permitting role. To try and consolidate that into one agency, or at the state level at least, could be inefficient. We'd have to go look for those resources. It could be confusing for developers who are maybe working with a certain agency on one type of project, but then have to think about who do I go to for offshore wind. So I think there's just some complexities added into there. And even if we were to try to go to a one-stop shop, we could never truly get there, only because there are some federal permitting requirements that some of our other agencies deal with. So if they weren't chosen as like the one-stop shop, they would still have to do work related to that permitting process.
Yeah, and I just want to add, as I mentioned, we have a 48-year-old permitting program at California Energy Commission, our AFC, or application for certification, and it may seem like it's a one-stop shop, but it's not a one-stop shop. We do environmental review, but we rely on the Coastal Commission, State Lands Commission, Department of Fish and Wildlife for their expertise. And we can't be focused in all areas. So if we did not have this ongoing partnership, memorandums of understanding, and relationships with these partner agencies, we could not do what we were able to do in a 18 to 24 month period just with our traditional process. So just want to emphasize what may seem like something really isn't. So.
Yeah, and I would just weigh in a little bit on the federal side. One-stop shop can mean a lot of different things, and I think, really when you have the leadership that, we're all going to row in the same direction for offshore wind, it's a de facto one-stop shop because everyone has the same goal in mind moving forward. So that's the way that I look at it. I know that, what your industry interest is maybe a little different, but I'm completely confident that on the federal side that everyone's rowing in the same direction, and it's kind of de facto one-stop shop.
Look, very fair points. I think our goal is to get permits, but permits that stand up in court and are ones that affected communities can support. So. No, all very fair points. Wanted to ask, the statistic has been cited, up to 82 potential permits that need to be obtained in order to go forward with an offshore wind project. Can you unpack that number a little bit? Like, is there a way to sort of to contract it a little bit and streamline it? I know the word streamlining is sometimes loaded. Maybe we'll use the word modernize, I guess. But is there a path to making the permitting process a little less sort of balkanized?
Yeah, so again, it's a coordinated approach. So one of our sister agencies we haven't mentioned is the California Air Resources Board. We work with the regional boards for the air quality. They have to give regional licenses where projects are. So I share that one example because, again, it's a coordinated approach. So it may be a unique permit, but we actually will take what the regional board provides, and we include it in our overall environmental review. So it's a coordinated approach that we work with several of the local governments, the regional agencies, as well as our state partners. And so there are some really good processes in place already on this coordinated approach that we're already using. So it can look at daunting, but because of, and I think there's been recommendations like on a checklist, it's almost like a checklist to help manage through those processes. Same with the federal government. We do work with, Department of Energy. We work with Department of Interior, where BOEM is under, the Bureau of Land Management, NOAA, and you can do all the acronyms for me. I'm still learning the state acronyms. But again, it's because of the coordination, because there is a checklist, it seems to funnel down and become very manageable because they also overlap a little as well.
You want to?
I'm trying to picture the 82 permits because I haven't seen the list yet, but it seems to be growing every time. Probably by next year's conference, it could be over 100. I'm not sure, but I can just, again, speak on the federal side. I think that it kind of goes back to the one-stop shop. We're pretty coordinated at the federal end. And I'm going to put a plug out there and just say, one of the lessons we learned from the East Coast was, we need to stay coordinated and do it early. And I'll just call out some of my federal partners out there is, National Marine Fisheries Service, we saw that offshore wind was coming on the West Coast. We've really, we have monthly meetings, and we've been doing that for, over a year now, probably closer to 2. So, we know that this is out there. And so I think that, that's one of the ways that we can work on the federal side to make sure that we're all, seeing things the same and make sure that, as these projects are designed and developed, that all the federal agencies are involved in that process so that, hopefully the permitting goes smoother down the line.
All right. Well, I want to ask maybe a little bit of a wonky question about the permitting roadmap. NEPA and CEQA. So, NEPA is obviously, everyone knows it's the statute that governs federal review of major federal actions, infrastructure projects. CEQA has a bit of a reputation of being one of the more onerous of the sort of baby NEPA statutes, the ones that are sort of the state analysis. How does this roadmap help the NEPA and CEQA process work together? And what can you tell the development community that maybe looks at CEQA's history and gets a little bit nervous?
Well, can I start by saying I'm happy to hear you say that NEPA is not as extraneous as CEQA. So for those of you who don't know the history, California adopted the California Environmental Protection Act in 1970. And then in 1974, the federal government liked what California was doing and enacted the National Environmental Protection Act. So it's good to see that, they took some lessons learned. So I just want to clarify that, Josh. But to ask your question again, I apologize.
Just how will the roadmap and the agencies get NEPA and CEQA to sort of work well together?
So there's a history already with the collaboration where some of our partner agencies under CNRA do a environmental impact report, and that overlaps with the federal environmental impact study, the EIS and the EIR. And then there's agencies like the Energy Commission, that's a certified regulatory program under CEQA and NEPA. So we do comprehensive reviews, but it's all we're all looking for the same things, right? So it's a very coordinated approach. And the key here is being able to do it simultaneously. So you're not doing one and then the other. and we have some experience in that realm as well. So, but we would need some, continued, a policy direction to ensure that that happens.
I think that's another benefit, though, from like the permitting roadmap is all of these agencies who are involved in some sort of permit for offshore wind, like they're now, or they will now be like aware of like each other's permits. So they'll know like, oh, this agency is going to do this. This is what is entailed by their permit. Okay, maybe I could build or leverage that work in terms of like doing their permit. So I think again, just having that familiarity with the process and knowing what permits are coming in what order and who else is having to do a permit is helpful for overall, just in terms of NEPA, CEQA, just the 82 permits, like all of that, I think. Yeah.
And I really don't have too much to add on that. Of course, the partnership with the state, but another plug I'll put in that, the first panel after lunch is going to be Rick Yard for, the regional supervisor from the Office of Environment, and talking with, more of our state partners on the permitting side. So they'll have much more information on that right after lunch.
So you're saying you don't want to steal Rick's thunder.
That's right.
And I want to add that this is nothing new to the state of California. So like the CNRA partner agencies, we all have, just in my division alone, we have 26 experts that from looking at hazmat, looking at noise abatement, because how many of you want some loud noise of a ramp up or ramp down of a power plant at 10 at night or 11 at night, right? But then biological sciences, cultural relations. So it's a comprehensive process that we have state experts, and my colleagues at our partner agencies have, parallel expertise at their agencies. So this isn't something that's unfamiliar territory to us.
All right. I did want to ask a little bit about, so government is people, right? And like you can have all the best processes, but if you don't have enough people to implement them, things can go sideways. How are you looking at sort of? I think you had mentioned yesterday 200 openings for the CEC.
Yeah, the chair did.
How are you looking at staffing up and getting the resources for this? For all the permits and that are needed. And I'll ask that on the federal side as well. And how are you staffing relative to the current unknowns about which agencies are going to which agency might be in the lead?
Great question. So. Chair Huckshield, who leads the California Energy Commission, mentioned at our symposium yesterday that we have over 200 vacancies at the California Energy Commission, and I know our partner agencies within CNRA and at the PUC and CalISO are in the same boat, and it's because of mandates that have been directed through the legislature and the governor, and so offshore wind is one piece of it. And it's all about recruitment. We've been fortunate to have individuals from both the Morro Bay area and the Humboldt area, where our first 5 leases have been signed with BOEM, and so we're getting expertise from that area. But it's communicating at events like this and doing a lot of outreach. But it's also, it takes time. There's a process to bring people on board, and it doesn't happen overnight. Thus, having to right now, transition folks from other work in order to focus on offshore wind in order to meet the tight timelines we have right now.
Yeah, and I would just add that, state workers are extremely dedicated. So unfortunately, what you find is, people going beyond what might be like the traditional 8 to 5, and we're going to be working like 8 to 8, 8 to 10, working weekends. So unfortunately, with additional work, without additional resources, you do get people who are just taking on that extra work and, make it happen. But to Elizabeth's point, there are often times where you'll have to, identify what gets prioritized on your plate. Or maybe things take longer because maybe there's only one person who has that expertise to work on a certain piece of a project. And so that process can take longer as they're being pulled in so many different directions. And again, just want to come back though to one of the benefits of that of the strategic plan, though, and going through this process, is the agency is working together to find ways where they can leverage each other's efforts. So outreach and engagement is very important to us. And so looking at, as we do outreach and engagement with the different communities or with, stakeholders or with, tribes, how can we build off of each other's efforts? So instead of maybe doing, 3 to 4 different agencies, each doing their own consultation, maybe trying to combine that consultation, or when there's a community meeting, instead of, again, 4 agencies each holding their own community meeting, joining forces. And so we're trying to find some ways to be more efficient and streamline the process, but it is definitely difficult when you need more resources.
Thanks, Josh. I'll put it this way. The region has been pretty fortunate with, the daunting workload that's coming up. We knew that it was coming, and, Congress has, given us some funds and FTE so that we can move forward. So I think with offshore wind being the priority, so we're able to do that. Don't take that to mean we couldn't use more funds in FTE. So, but, I did want to, say that, one of the other priorities that we have in the region, in the Bureau, and the federal government side is, we've been able to, fortunate enough to get additional FTE that we need to bring in to get this work done. But, at the same time, when we've been able to prioritize, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. So we've been able to rewrite those job announcements, rewrite the position descriptions, get that done, so that not only are we bringing in, new FTE, we're making sure that we have a diverse pool of applicants. And I'll say that, it's been really great. I think that, we're trying to do in the region, making the best workforce that we have possible. And I think just give me a little bit of time, but, in the next couple, 6 months to a year, we're definitely going to have a diverse work pool in the region, and we're going to continue to be able to do great things in partnership with the state.
I'm really glad you brought up DEI. That's so important in this. And I'll just note, offshore wind industry is creating jobs, not just for, on vessels and in the ports. It's the people at the desks making it happen as well. Well, I wanted to, a lot of this talk is about getting these 5 leases from open water to floating wind turbines and transmission cables and substations. But want to talk a little bit about what's next. We've heard a little bit about the effort to identify additional sea space. We can't stop at just 5 projects. Obviously, 25 gigawatts needs more real estate, so to speak, and more real estate means a supply chain that can assure that there's a pipeline of projects. Can you folks tell me a little bit about the process of looking towards the next wind energy area identification? Maybe Doug, you want to start since you're the lead?
I will start on that, and again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but we really are working in partnership with the state. And, part of the AB 525 process is, the identification of additional sea space. Because, I think we can all agree that, Great Lease Sale, very exciting, 5 gigawatts, state goal, 25 gigawatts, the math isn't there. So we're going to have to identify more areas. And I can say that we're taking our initial looks now. We're going to make sure that we do it right. We're going to do it correct. But I think there is a sense of urgency to get things done, and we're continuing to work in that process. And I think everyone is looking forward to that certainty and what it looks like. So I will say, stay tuned. It's going to happen. We are going to have to find more areas, and I think it's. Again, in partnership with the state, looking at the timing on what that looks like, and making sure that we have some realistic areas that that we can move forward with the federal process of a call, and how it aligns with the AB 525 identification of additional sea space.
Yeah, and I can add to it the states also. In AB 525, we are mandated to have a chapter in the strategic plan specific to sea space. We are blessed to have 1.5 people working on C-Space, and I know I want to shout out to them in the back of the room. And there's a process, and it also goes back to what we've been talking this entire conversation about collaboration and coordination with our partner agencies, our tribal governments, our ocean users, and other stakeholders. And I mention that because in identifying sea-space, there is a process, right? First, you have to look and see where is the wind, right? So we do wind assessments. We do, ocean and ocean life assessments. There's protected areas that get identified. And so once you start, going from what's out there and then how you narrow the focus of identifying that sea space, then you look at what is actually feasible and what can we actually do to get to the 25 gigawatts by 2045. So the state has a process. I know BOEM, as the lead agency, has a process. And then the key is collaboration with our federal partners. And so we've made a commitment to meet on a regular basis and start having that discussion. A key component is we're doing consultations. We've just began in late April with a back-to-back with the fishing industry and with tribal consultations, and these will continue through the month of May and June as we develop a draft strategic plan chapter on sea space. So it is a process, and we're moving through that.
And I think, building off what Elizabeth said, I think what you'll see again, and now I'll sound like a broken record, you'll definitely see a lot more, you'll see continued outreach and engagement with all of the different entities and stakeholders. I think, again, that's really important. That was really important during leading up to the first lease sale. Considering a second lease sale or even the areas for that, definitely outreach and engagement will be a huge component. There's a lot we've learned from going through this first round, and so we'll build on that. But definitely, I think community members, stakeholders, tribes, industry, everybody can expect that there will be some sort of robust outreach and engagement process to be engaged in. And not just held here in Sacramento, but also regionally.
Okay. Yeah. Do you have a sense of the timing? Thinking particularly about the industry, of when we can plug into the process.
The process is ongoing. Okay. So we will be having a workshop either the end of May, early June. We have 5 workshops planned over the next 6 to 8 weeks. So come to our website, and it's definitely going to be an opportunity for public engagement. We're also doing outreach, so if you're an interested individual or a group, also email us. We're setting up these type of consultations right now around C-Space, and we hope to have something to share in that chapter when we post the draft strategic plan by the end of June.
No, that's really helpful, and I have a question that this can make me sound like a broken record to those of you who know me, but can you give us a sense, and if you can't, just that's fine, of what's the scope of this next wind energy area process? One of I think industry's concerns with how BOEM does its leasing process is that sometimes it feels like it's not clear what the end goal is, and that having an end goal in mind, not binding obviously, but one that centers the conversation, could be really helpful, not just for industry but for other stakeholders to understand what the objective is. I don't know if it's too early, or if you have a sense even in the broadest strokes of sort of number of gigawatts, percentage of the goal that you're hoping for in this particular process, or if that's something that is not ripe to share.
It's a very good question. Our round one, as we like to call it, 4.5 gigawatts. So we still have a little over 20 gigawatts to meet our 2045 goal. What that looks like in the next round or the next round after that, I know the East Coast, they have 27 leases already. amongst the Atlantic coast. I don't think we're going to need that many off the California coast, but we do have, a substantial goal on what we want to get to in the next, 20 plus years. So at some point we'll be looking at, additional lease auctions to help us get there. What that timeline and process will look like, we'll know more as we finalize that strategic plan and when it's adopted in September. So.
And it might be helpful just to also kind of talk about like what we would look, what we're considering, right, when we look at additional areas. So this is based on science, it's based on resources, it's based on the multiple competing uses of the ocean. Excuse me. So looking at where's the best wind resource, offshore wind resource, where is there already existing uses, and how would the offshore wind, how would it align with other uses? So for example, fishing, how it align with existing, migratory routes for maybe birds or, mammals. So all of that gets taken into account, even looking at like the ocean depth. I remember when we were on our East Coast tour, there was one project they told us about that had won a lease, but then couldn't finish it because when they did their environmental review, like the substrate, because they were fixed bottom, so the substrate couldn't handle the fixed bottom, so they actually had to back out. So again, like we're looking at all of these things, and like that will help determine what the area looks like, the size of the area, and as Elizabeth pointed out, we're trying to reach these aspirational goals by in the next few years. We'll see what happens, but I don't think we can guarantee like what that next size or shape will look like.
There's a lot of ocean users, so. Another plug for our federal friends over here. I mean, we're working with the U.S. Coast Guard, Department of Defense. And then our overall arching goal is environmental protection, right? So there's a lot of moving parts to this. And for those of you in this space full time, as you know, the Pacific coastline is much different than the Atlantic coastline, which is why they're successful, our partners on the East Coast, doing fixed bottom. And out here, you can only go so far out, and then you have these, major drops, right? And so because of that depth, we have to look at floating technology. So you won't see any fixed bottom off the California coast. So there's some uniqueness on what we're doing on the West Coast compared to what's happening on the East Coast.
And I'll just answer the question directly. It's probably not ripe, but we are thinking about it. And there are a lot of things out there, and is it going to be, like Elizabeth said, we had round one. Is it going to be round two that encompasses the next 20 gigawatts? Is it going to be a round two and then a round three? Those are some of the things that we have to think about. And, we're taking all that in as we speak. And, I think that, as time progresses, then, we'll make sure that everyone knows. But I think at the end of the day, the end goal is, 25 gigawatts by 2045. We're going to work in partnership with the state to make that happen. So I think for certainty, that's the certain, how it looks. We're still trying to come up with the best path forward to make sure that, we do everything, we do it right, we collaborate as we know that we should, as we've done in the past, as we're going to continue to do in the future, to make sure that everyone is involved. So, I'll say again, it will be relatively soon, but right now we don't have, it's not quite ripe to unveil now.
Well, I know we're almost out of time, but I wanted to make sure. Obviously, there are topics that have been brought up, like procurement and ports, which are vital. But I wanted to focus a little bit in the time remaining on transmission and sort of what because there is such a nexus between transmission and permitting the projects. What are the strategies that you see being needed in the next 5 to 7 years to make sure that these projects can physically get into the grid?
Transmission, or did you want to go?
Oh, no, go ahead.
It's all free. It's free form.
So you know that elephant in the room? Well, transmission is that elephant in the room, right? Because there's transmission is needed throughout the state, not just to bring offshore wind electricity to our homes, but it is obviously a key component. And you know, we may not get to these questions here, but again, we have a workshop coming up because there is a chapter required in the strategic plan on transmission planning. So we've put out a paper in December around offshore wind. We had a workshop, and we plan to have another workshop again at the end of May, early June. And so what does transmission look like? So if you can picture, you've got this floating power plant, right, in federal waters. And we've got to get that electricity that's generated at floating power plant. And then has to go through from federal waters to state waters and then on to state lands. So what does that look like? We know as Le-Quyen had mentioned on our East Coast study tour, that they've got a spaghetti system for their transmission, and we know we don't want that kind of system. So there's going to be at our workshop discussions about a floating substation where these turbines can connect to that substation, and then maybe one huge subsea cable that can bring it onto shore with to a substation, and then connect to all the distribution lines. So it's but there's a lot of different ways that we're looking at this. I mean, there's also opportunities to transmit, further down the coast. If you're up in Humboldt, you could bring it down to the Bay Area through the ocean bottom. So there's nothing off the table at this point, but it's a comprehensive process, again, with our CNRA partner agencies, but also our energy agencies. So in December, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the California Public Utilities Commission, our CPUC as we fondly say it, and the California Independent System Operator, CALISO as we finally referred to them. And a report just came out at the end of February, if you have not seen it, where it has a component on how we can deploy some of these 15 kilowatt lines to support offshore wind. So a lot of planning is underway right now, and a lot of opportunities to share your great ideas and provide feedback and input. We're also studying all our corridors. How can we expand on our existing corridors? Do we need to look at expanding to new corridors? So everything is being discussed right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think transmission is just larger than an offshore wind problem.
Yeah.
We have so many resources that we're fortunate to have in California, but we also have an aging infrastructure. We also have, a very populated state with different load centers that are not just located in either northern or southern or central California. So really thinking through, all of these projects that are coming online that are clean energy and not just offshore wind, like how are we going to get those resources to where they need to be? What does that priority look like? And also the cost, like who's going to pay for this? I mean, I'm interested to hear the panel tomorrow because I was hoping they would have the answers to this. But I also encourage everybody, a lot of the issues that we've talked about today, it's not just something that the state is going to be able to figure out by ourselves. Like we really need input and we need ideas, solutions, things that you all think could be helpful or, different ways of looking at it. I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday and we're thinking about like, okay, how could you increase load use like closer to where the offshore wind will be. So for example, could you look at green ports, again, because that helps with our clean energy goals, our carbon neutrality goals, but is also helping with, taking off some of that load and reducing that need for transmission, at least in the near term, but allowing offshore wind to come online. So again, solutions needed.
Well, we are out of time. I'm heartened to hear that, we have the right minds thinking through the right problems, or all the problems that have been flagged. Really appreciate the conversation today. Thank you everyone for your attention, and please come up and ask us any other questions that you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.